Eagles Nation, it is good to have football back again. In reviewing the preseason game, we have a lot of players to get to today, so I'll jump right in. Unfortunately, I won't have time to get to everyone, but I'll touch on more players as camp and preseason games continue. We'll start with the Jalen Carter play. He only saw the field for 2 plays, but he made his presence known quickly. Jalen showed pretty much what he put on tape in his time at Georgia. Elite strength and movement skills with a nuanced pass rush game plan for someone so young. Jalen does a great job attacking upfield with his first step, but he quickly recognized that the guard overset, and on his second step, he plants hard and explodes inside. Pay attention to how much lateral movement he is able to get. That's a lot of distance for any guard to recover from. He does a great job timing up his feet and his hands. He gives himself a good base to be able to generate rotational force with his core when he clubs the guard's shoulder. Jalen then steps through with his trail leg, while at the same time using a swim move to get past the block. It can take years for players to figure out how to consistently sync up their feet with their hands and their pass rush while reacting to the pass blocker's movement. Jalen showed that off on his first play. Listen to Jalen's description of how the play went down.
I had an outside move in my mind, but after just seeing him come off the ball the way he did, translated into inside moving, and I got inside.
Impressive stuff. It's just one play, but there's a lot to be excited about. Now, that brings us to his fellow first-round pick, Nolan Smith. Before getting into the film, we need to have a discussion on expectations and where Nolan's game is at coming into his rookie year, as people seem surprised at his technical proficiency when I released a video of all of Nolan's snaps in his first NFL game action. Nolan's expectations were blown way out of proportion during the offseason. I understand the excitement for new players, and the shiny new object syndrome always leads to inflated expectations, but there were some outlandish predictions. At first, I laughed when I saw a couple people predicting that he would lead the Eagles in sacks this year, but then I saw more and more tweets from people saying Nolan would have 15 to 16 sacks this season. The rookie record is 14.5, and Nolan had 12.5 sacks his entire 4 years in college. It seems a little out there to think that he's gonna move to the NFL and immediately get more sacks in one season than his 4 years against lower competition. There are endless predictions of Nolan winning Defensive Rookie of the Year, and while that's more of an understandable prediction, he's not gonna unseat Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat to get enough snaps to put up comparable stats to guys that will really be competing for the title. My point is, have more realistic expectations for Nolan. Give this guy time to grow into the player that we all expect him to become. Nolan was drafted in the first round because of his athletic traits and character, not his current skill level. It's a bet on his potential. Now, let's add some context to the situation. In my breakdown of Nolan Smith I released post-draft, I shared this graphic comparing career snap counts of all the first-round edge players in the 2023 draft. Nolan had significantly less snaps than most of the edge rushers. The only player he had more snaps than was Lucas Van Ness, who is also considered a project. Georgia was so loaded on defense that they played with a heavy rotation on the D-line. Jalen Carter was the best player on his team, and he didn't even start until his last year in college. We also need to factor in Georgia's defensive philosophy. They turned their program into a powerhouse when they committed themselves to stopping the run, but they wanted to stop the run using the least amount of resources as possible in order to be able to dedicate more resources to stopping the pass. What this led to was a much greater responsibility to being run-first defenders on the defensive line. In order to generate pressure, Georgia relied much more on using stunts and line movements. Consider this response from Jalen Carter after being asked how it felt to have Nolan lined up next to him on his quarterback hit in the preseason game.
It's awesome just seeing Nolan on the side of me, bring back college moments. You know, if it was the same play call, me and Nolan probably would have ran a stunt right there. So.
In addition to generating pressure with stunts, Georgia used a lot of creeper and simulated pressure plays. Creepers and sim pressures are plays that are intended to cause confusion by giving the impression that the defense is sending extra rushers, when in reality, they are only sending 4 rushers while dropping defensive linemen into coverage. Nolan was tasked with dropping into coverage on a lot of these plays. When we factor in all of that, Nolan only had 498 snaps as a pass rusher, or about 13 a game. A good amount of those plays he was running some sort of stunt, and on a number of other plays he was a run-first defender. He had very few true pass rush plays compared to the majority of edge rushers that are drafted in the first round, and that helps explain why he has a raw skill set when it comes to rushing the passer. A side note, this is the same reason why 2022 number 1 overall pick Trayvon Walker also has a limited pass rush skill set despite his insane athletic profile. Now, as we look to the film from Saturday's preseason game, as expected, there were some really positive things as well as some things to work on. I mentioned back in the summer that Nolan should add the ghost technique to his arsenal due to his ability to bend and shorter stature. It's not something he showed a whole lot in college, so it was really nice to see him execute it in his first game. He even set it up by flashing the long arm. He ended up about a foot away from getting a strip sack, and if that happened, then those 15 sack predictions would have jumped to 20. This move is gonna be deadly for him. The only caveat, if he is gonna use a long arm as a setup, then he needs to be better with his long arm, or else linemen will ignore it and wait for the ghost technique. He has a habit of extending his arm too early. By extending early, he doesn't have much pop in his punch, and the energy in his punch is already released before contact. It also slows him down in his rush, as running with one arm extended will obviously make you slower. He can't get the necessary body turn and forward lean when he extends that early. Let's look at this example from Josh Sweat. He gets much closer to the lineman before extending. Upon contact, notice how his arm, shoulder, and chest are almost perpendicular to the chest of the tackle. This allows Sweat to maximize the length of his long arm. Compare that to Nolan. When he makes contact, his chest is nearly square with the chest of the tackle. This shortens the long arm, and because he can't stack the joints in his elbow and shoulder, his arm collapses. Back to Sweat. He gets a great forward lean with good hand placement above his shoulder line. Notice how he is able to generate a lot of force because of his leverage and body lean. He finishes the move by grabbing the wrist of the offensive lineman with his offhand and lifting him. The lineman has lost all of his power angles, and Sweat gets the sack. Back to Nolan. He gets some forward body lean with his upper body, but his feet are under his hips and he can't generate much power. If I asked you to push a car, would you do it with your body in a position like Nolan or Sweat? Nolan doesn't utilize the same leverage and hand placement as Sweat, so he isn't able to get much push. He does use his offhand to control the wrist, but because he didn't keep the tackle at a distance with his long arm, the tackle gets his outside hand on Nolan, making it harder to break free. In addition to that, Nolan needs to get more consistent syncing up his hands and his feet in his rush. On this play, instead of just trying to run upfield to attack an edge, he changes it up by using a direct approach, where he runs towards the lineman with his initial rush. Nolan wants to give the impression that a bull rush is coming so that the pass blocker stops their feet and shoots their hands in preparation to anchor. His second step, he is using a step replace technique to clear his hips around the lineman. I talked more in detail about it in my Josh Sweat breakdown, but just know that this is more indicative of a speed rush where Nolan would attack the outside arm or shoulder or even try a dip and rip move, but instead tries to bull rush with his upper body while his lower body is coming around the tackle. Like with the long arm we looked at, he's not going to generate much push if his feet aren't behind him and driving forward. My guess as to why he didn't try to chop the arm or something similar is because he tried to step replace with too much distance between himself and the tackle. Again, let's look at a rep from Josh Sweat. Like Nolan, he's using a direct approach with the step replace, but he's much closer to the pass blocker so that when the lineman does shoot their hands, he's in a position to swat it away before finishing through with a rip. And the run game. I like Nolan's aggressiveness to close the gap between the down block and kick out from the guard. He showed his toughness several times on plays like this in college. Some people commented that they were concerned that Nolan was a little too small to hold up as a run defender. To be fair, the guy he was going against was a 6'8", 380-pound monster. That's 65 pounds heavier than the average offensive tackle. The Eagles, nor fans, should expect Nolan to win a ton of reps in the run game against a guy that big. And in real games, I would hope that the coaches would limit the amount of exposure to guys that big in obvious run situations. Moving on to Sidney Brown, and probably the talk of the game. It was easy to see on his college tape that Sidney was going to be a fan favorite once he hit the field. He's relentless and aggressive, and combined with his athleticism, people are already making Troy Polamalu and Bob Sanders comparisons. We got to see him play in different alignments than we did in college. We hardly got to see Sidney play the run coming down from the top of the defense in college, but versus the Ravens, for the most part, he took good angles and was fast getting to the ball. He was aligned all over, from split field to the middle post to in the box. He also showcased his range in the passing game as well. On this play, he did a great job reading the drop and body language of the quarterback to know he was looking to take a deep shot. He read the quarterback's eyes and made a beeline for the ball. Being able to get to the sideline from the middle post is incredibly impressive, especially when you consider that he was not asked to play the middle post much at Illinois. Now, Sidney was playing more in positions that he had much less familiarity with in college. Like with Nolan, we need to give some time for Sidney to adjust to the new role and the nuances that come with it. While Sidney did display good range on this ball, he also started running aggressively to the sideline very quickly, well before the ball was thrown. If he's that aggressive, moving with the eyes of the quarterback and vacating the middle of the field, then teams will use that aggression against him. They will look Sydney off and take shots where he should be. It's like an aggressive boxer. A big puncher will throw a lot of haymakers, but when they miss, they open themselves up for bigger counter punches. We see another example of this in the game. Almost immediately, Sydney turns and runs toward the sideline, but I can't figure out why. Even when looking at the tight view, it doesn't appear that the quarterback looks to his right. As a post safety, Sydney should be patient reading the quarterback's drop and eyes. He can't vacate the middle of the field immediately. It might not seem like a big deal, but on this play, Sydney probably could have gotten a hit on the quarterback, and oftentimes, being the second man in on the tackle is a great opportunity for a big hit or to punch the ball out. I want to take a look at his work in man coverage too. In college, he almost exclusively played man coverage using what is called catch technique. It's a technique where the defender plays off coverage on their man, but they don't backpedal, instead moving laterally to try to catch the player as they approach. Because of this, we didn't get to see Sydney play man coverage utilizing a backpedal much. While he played some catch technique in this game, he also backpedaled on a few reps. There were a couple things I noticed on this play. The man he is covering stems his route outside, but it doesn't appear that Sydney weaves with him to match the outside stem. Rather, he's dropping straight back, which is creating separation. During his backpedal, he begins to open his hips, though his cushion hasn't really been threatened yet. And then, when he does open and break, he steps underneath himself with his left leg and drifts upfield a bit instead of breaking on an angle towards his man. Sydney has great closing speed for safety, but if the ball was thrown to his man, it would have been a completion. Let's compare to this play from Eli Ricks. The receiver Ricks is covering stems outside, so we see Ricks weave outside as well. He keeps his shoulders square, and then when he breaks on the ball, he takes an angle to attack the receiver's upfield shoulder. This allows Ricks to make a play on the ball. On this run play, we again see the double-edged sword that is Sydney's aggressiveness. Sydney shows off his explosiveness and long speed to chase this running back down from behind. But as a split field safety, he should not have been this far inside on a run that was designed to go away from his side. He is too aggressive in his pursuit of the ball, and he overruns his assignment. He should have been slow playing this from the backside, waiting for a cutback or reverse. If he did, he would have shown off his athleticism, making a big tackle for a loss, not showing it off by chasing down the running back from behind as they cross the first down marker. Again, on a run play, this time from the box, he is aggressive trying to shoot the gap from the backside. It's a high risk, high reward play, because if he doesn't make the play, he's not in a position to be able to pursue the ball and make a stop. Luckily for the Eagles, this was called back due to a hold, but Sydney should have been playing over top of the blocks. If he did, I have a feeling he would have chased the ball down. Compare this to a similar rep from Kayvon Wallace. He is patient, plays his assignment, and waits for the play to come to him. The defense is designed so that the defensive end and playside linebacker force the run back to Wallace, folding in from the backside. If Wallace had freelanced to try to make a big play, the Ravens would have hit this for a long gain. Listen to some of these comments.
Yeah, I thought Sydney's done well. You know, he's at a good camp, and he's continuing to grow in terms of their aggressiveness. That's the art of a coach, you know. I mean, sometimes their great traits can hurt us, but I mean, he hasn't done that. You know, he's done a good job and just teaching the techniques that we want, and then you got to let these guys play. You know, that's part of what got them here. So we want their traits to show.
I mean, he's definitely a great player. One thing you will not question about Sydney is his effort. I mean, if he even messing up, it's 100%. So, you know, you can't coach that, but you can fix all the other little details that he needs work with, and he's able to listen, he's able to learn from it, and he's definitely going to be good.
I think there's a lot of stuff I can clean up. I'm going to come in on these tackles the same way that I'm doing, but maybe just, you know, better angles, making sure that I'm making contact, finishing through, you know what I mean, making those secured ones. But again, I'm going to pull the trigger and shoot my shot when I can.
A little bit of coach speak from Desai, but there's also some good insight into the fact that Sydney is still learning, and with that learning comes making mistakes. As Desai said, sometimes that aggressiveness can hurt the team. I think for Sydney, learning how to play a little slower and then sudden will help his game. Ultimately, Sydney has started to get more work with the first team since the preseason game, but he's also rotating with 3 other guys for that last safety spot. I think the Eagles will try to get Sydney into the game in certain packages as he continues to learn the defense and how they want him to play. But once he takes over, him and Reed are gonna be a lot of fun to watch. Switching to the offensive side of the ball, I thought Tyler Steen did some good things on Saturday. He looked good at both guard and tackle. His strength showed off in multiple ways. He decleated a Ravens defensive end on a run play when he was at tackle. And then at guard, he did a good job opening up holes on the ground. On this play, he displays his core and grip strength to torque the defensive end out of the hole for Penny. I really like this rep from Steen at tackle. First thing to notice is how quick Steen is getting off the ball. No doubt that he's learned a bit from Lane already. While he he oversets just a bit and is a little early with his strike timing, he shows off his nimble feet to redirect and mirror while also refitting his hands. He easily washed the defensive end out of the play. In my breakdown of Tyler Steen, I highlighted his ability to redirect and is one of the reasons I think he can succeed at tackle in spite of his short arms. He did a good job against David Ojabo, who would have been a first-round pick in 2022 if not for a torn Achilles in the pre-draft process. He was still taken in the second round anyway. While I still think he needs to work on his posture when pass rushers approach, he has the foot quickness needed to run guys out of the play. At guard, he regularly held his own, oftentimes playing long and giving up hardly any ground to pass rushers. Again, he displayed his foot quickness to be able to mirror and redirect, and his grip strength allowed him to lock on and control defenders. Even on a play where he got knocked off balance, he showed incredible core strength and athleticism to recover and neutralize the defensive tackle. There were a couple mental errors on his side. First, we'll start with the sack. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure this is on Steen. Mariota seems to be the only one unaware that a blitz was coming. Pass protection schemes are a discussion for another video, but in most cases, you want to protect from the inside out, but that's not always the case, particularly in big-on-big protection schemes. Either way, Mariota was responsible for one of the rushers that were blitzing and seemed woefully unaware. This ball should have been thrown hot. At worst, I'm gonna say the sack should be partially credited to both Steen and Mariota. There were a couple plays at guard where he made some mental errors as well. On one play, he seemed to think that a stunt was coming, so he looked like he was trying to pass off the defensive lineman to his tackle. It was a third down play, so he's not wrong to be alert to a stunt, but he can't just let the guy go. There was also a play where he combo blocked up to the wrong second level defender. And then on this play, him and the center should have been working together to sort the block between the defensive tackle and linebacker. It appears that they locked on their assignment pre-snap, and as a result, when the defensive tackle crashed inside, it prevented the center from getting to the linebacker. Playing offensive line, you have to work as a unit. And considering these guys have hardly played together, you're gonna get some errors like this. I think the theme of this video is patience, and just like with Nolan and Sydney, we should be patient with Steen in his development. He's also a rookie learning a new position, and he also has some great athletic traits. You can see the potential with Steen, as well as Sydney and Nolan. The Eagles aren't in a position where these guys need to play a lot of snaps from the get-go. And as much as we want to see our shiny new toys on the field right away, exercising patience is probably best for their development and for the team. One last player I wanted to touch on Jordan Davis briefly. He only played 5 snaps, and the ball didn't find him in those few plays, but he did what he should have done against backup offensive linemen. He showed his trademark skill to be a run stopper with his ability to lock out and shed. He also showed some improved quickness on one of his pass rushes, slanting to the other side of the center before walking him back into the quarterback. The ball was out quick, but Jordan was collapsing the pocket. I saw some comments in the Twitterverse that Jordan didn't do anything in the game, but he only had 5 plays, and he looked good in those plays. I don't think he's ever going to be a guy that racks up a bunch of sacks, but I do expect him to be a guy that pushes the pocket consistently. Getting sacks at defensive tackle is hard, and the old adage for defensive tackles is, disruption is production. Jordan is going to help a lot of other guys get sacks by pushing the pocket and forcing the quarterback to escape into the arms of other pass rushers. Overall, I thought there were a lot of positives from the first preseason game. I wasn't able to get to a lot of players in depth, such as McKee, Ricks, Ojomo, Job, and Wallace, but I will get around to them as the preseason pushes on. Until next time, go Birds.